Hey, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to get into something that I think is going to spark some really interesting conversation. We're going to be talking about how Black men navigate relationships and societal expectations, all that good stuff in today's world. And for our source material, we are going to be using a really interesting and lively YouTube discussion. It's from the channel This Might Be Risky. And for those who may not be familiar with This Might Be Risky, it's a channel known for its open and honest and sometimes very heated debates about relationships, culture, and pretty much everything in between. And we found a video here that has some real gems. I mean, some really strong opinions, personal anecdotes, like the whole 9 yards. We're going to get into it. So buckle up. We're about to unpack some serious insights on financial expectations, respect, and just how these dynamics play out in real life. And of course, a huge shout out to our sponsor, OtisWho Network out of St. Louis, Missouri. They're the ones making this deep dive possible, so show them some love. All right, so let's jump right in. The YouTube discussion kicks off with a bang. It just dives straight into the deep end, talking about the connection between men paying bills and the level of respect they receive in relationships. Some of the participants feel very strongly that if a man's carrying 100% of the financial burden, his partner should automatically show a certain level of submission and respect.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting here is that this belief isn't just about money. It kind of taps into deeper societal expectations about masculinity and traditional gender roles. You know, these participants are essentially saying that a man's worth, his authority in the relationship is directly tied to his financial contribution.
And you can definitely see where this gets a little complicated because then you have other voices in the discussion, people like a commenter named Aaron L., who argue that plenty of successful couples thrive on a 50-50 financial model. They see equality, not financial dependence, as the foundation for a healthy relationship.
Exactly, and that contrast really highlights one of the key tensions I think that runs throughout this entire YouTube discussion. Are we talking about actual respect, or are we talking about control disguised as respect? Because you can demand obedience, but you can't really demand genuine respect.
That's a really good point. It makes you wonder, is there even a real correlation between a man being the sole provider and the level of cooperation he gets in return? Is that trade-off even happening in reality?
Well, that's where the personal anecdotes in this YouTube discussion get really fascinating. One participant who does pay 100% of the bills actually admits that his partner still exhibits the same demanding behavior as women who work and contribute financially.
Wait, hold up. So he's carrying all the financial weight, but it doesn't seem to be buying him any extra peace or submission.
Right, and this challenges that common assumption that we were talking about earlier, that somehow a man becoming the sole provider magically creates a harmonious, submissive relationship. It really highlights that, financial dependence doesn't automatically equal emotional fulfillment or respect. Think about it as the listener. Are there parallels in your own life, in relationships that you've observed?
Yeah, this next point is a real head-scratcher. Another participant in the discussion points out this almost contradictory expectation some women seem to have. They say that they prioritize a man's character and principles over his money. But then they want him to be willing to compromise those very same principles for them.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, I love your strong moral compass, but could you maybe point it in a different direction when it comes to me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But seriously, what's going on there?
Well, it points to that inherent tension I think we all face in relationships. Balancing your own values and needs with the needs of your partner. And that brings up a really important question. Does constantly acquiescing to your partner's desires, even when it goes against your own principles, actually diminish the respect they have for you?
So we've got men feeling this pressure to be providers, to potentially compromise their principles. It almost feels like they're walking a tightrope, trying to meet all these conflicting expectations.
Absolutely. And that's where this discussion, I think, gets really thought-provoking, because it starts to explore whether all this acquiescing, all this bending over backwards to please might actually be backfiring.
Now I'm really intrigued. Let's unpack that.
So we're really diving deeper into this idea that constantly giving in to your partner's demands, no matter what, might not be the recipe for a healthy, respectful relationship.
Yeah, it's almost counterintuitive. You would think that being accommodating would lead to more harmony.
Yeah.
But this YouTube discussion is suggesting that there might be a downside.
Exactly. Several participants argue that consistently, bending over backwards to please a woman can actually lead to less respect and cooperation in the long run. It's like the more you try to mold yourself into what you think she wants, the less she sees you as an individual with your own thoughts, feelings, and boundaries.
So instead of, building attraction, it might actually have the opposite effect.
That's the argument being made, and it ties into another interesting point raised in the discussion, the idea that society might be putting increasing pressure on men to conform to women's expectations, especially when it comes to dating and intimacy.
Yeah, I can definitely see that play out in real life, you know.
Yeah.
Guys going to extreme lengths to impress women, doing things that they wouldn't normally enjoy, even sacrificing their own values just to get a date.
Right, and this raises a crucial question for you, the listener. If a man is constantly changing himself to fit someone else's mold, is he being authentic? And if not, can he truly expect genuine respect and a fulfilling relationship?
It makes you wonder if there's a correlation between a man's willingness to constantly acquiesce and the level of respect he receives from his partner. Does bending to her, every whim, ultimately diminish his value in her eyes?
It's a complex issue, and it's definitely something worth pondering. The YouTube discussion seems to suggest that, in some cases, women might lose respect for a man who they perceive as too easily manipulated. It's like they crave a partner who has his own backbone, his own sense of self.
That makes sense. It's like they're looking for someone who could be both a partner and an equal, not just someone who's constantly catering to their needs.
Exactly. And this isn't about saying that men should never compromise or be considerate. It's about finding that balance between being accommodating and staying true to yourself, your own values and principles.
So if we're saying that, constant acquiescence might not be the answer, what are some alternatives? What does a healthy, respectful dynamic look like?
Well, the YouTube discussion offers some interesting perspectives on that as well. One recurring theme is the importance of clear communication from the very beginning.
Yes, several participants emphasize the need to have those honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversations about finances, roles, expectations, and boundaries, all before things get too serious. It's about being upfront about what you want and what you're not willing to compromise on.
Absolutely. And it's not just about voicing your own needs. It's about truly listening to your partner's needs as well. It's about creating a space where both of you can feel heard and respected, even when you have different opinions or desires.
Another key takeaway from the discussion is the importance of self-improvement. There's a lot of talk about men needing to focus on developing their character, their skills, their overall well-being. It's not about trying to become someone you're not. It's about becoming the best version of yourself.
And I think that's such a crucial point because ultimately, the more you invest in yourself, the more you have to offer in a relationship. You become more attractive, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And that kind of self-assurance can make all the difference in how you interact with potential partners.
One participant put it really well. He said that women can sense when a man is secure in himself. And that kind of confidence is incredibly attractive. It's not about arrogance. It's about knowing your worth and not being afraid to show it.
Right. It's about having that inner strength and self-belief that allows you to stand firm in your convictions, set healthy boundaries, and walk away from situations that don't serve you.
Okay, but I know what some listeners might be thinking right now. They'll be hearing this and picturing some strong, silent type who never shows any vulnerability.
And that's a really important point to address because vulnerability, when expressed appropriately, can actually be a strength in relationships. The YouTube discussion highlights this idea of emotional intelligence, being able to express your feelings in a healthy and constructive way.
So not about bottling things up or pretending you're some emotionless robot.
Definitely not. It's about being able to articulate your needs without being demanding or accusatory. And it's about being able to listen to your partner's needs with empathy and compassion.
There's a great story in the discussion about a guy who realized that he needed to be more vulnerable with his partner. He started sharing his fears and insecurities and found that it actually brought them closer.
That's the power of vulnerability. It creates a space for deeper intimacy and connection. It shows your partner that you trust them enough to let them see the real you, flaws and all.
This is all really resonating with me. It's like the discussion is urging us to rethink those old school ideas about what it means to be a man in a relationship.
Absolutely. And it's encouraging us to build relationships based on mutual respect, honest communication, and a genuine appreciation for who we are as individuals.
So we've talked about communication, self-improvement, vulnerability. What other gems did this YouTube discussion unearth? As we're wrapping up this deep dive, I keep coming back to this one question. How do we square all this with the messages we get from society about what a man, especially a black man, is supposed to be? The YouTube discussion really grapples with those pressures that men face around masculinity and being a provider.
Yeah, there's this almost paradoxical expectation: be strong but sensitive, be the leader, yet be emotionally available.
Yeah.
It's a tough balancing act, and it can be incredibly confusing for guys trying to figure out where they fit in.
It's like the definition of masculinity is constantly shifting, right? What was considered manly a generation ago might be seen as outdated or even harmful today.
Right, and one of the most powerful takeaways, I think, from this discussion is that men have the power to redefine masculinity on their own terms. It's about rejecting those rigid societal norms and embracing a more nuanced and authentic understanding of manhood.
There's a great example in the YouTube comments of a guy who used to feel pressured to fit into that, like, hyper-masculine mold, but it never felt quite right. He realized that true strength comes from being comfortable with his emotions, communicating effectively, and being a supportive partner.
That's such an important point. It's not about denying your masculinity. It's about expanding it to include qualities like empathy, vulnerability, and emotional intelligence.
And I think it's worth acknowledging that, the online world can really complicate things too. Social media often presents a very idealized and unrealistic view of relationships, which can create a ton of pressure and insecurity.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the comparison game when you're constantly bombarded with images of seemingly perfect couples living these picture-perfect lives. But as the listener, you have to remember social media is often a highlight reel, not real life.
One commenter talked about how he used to feel terrible after scrolling through Instagram and seeing all these couples on these exotic vacations, seemingly without a care in the world. He realized that he was comparing his own relationship to a fantasy, which was causing him a lot of unnecessary stress.
Yeah, it's crucial to be mindful of the content you consume and remember that social media is a curated version of reality. It's not a fair comparison to your own life, your own relationship, or your own unique journey.
This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's clear that, modern relationships, especially for Black men, navigating these complex societal expectations, are a constant work in progress.
And there's no one-size-fits-all approach. The beauty of this YouTube discussion is that it highlights so many different perspectives and experiences. It reminds us that we're all figuring this out together.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with this thought. Embrace the complexity. Don't be afraid to challenge those outdated societal expectations. Communicate openly and honestly with your partner. Invest in your own self-improvement, and above all, remember that building a fulfilling and lasting partnership takes time, effort, and a whole lot of love. And of course, a huge thanks again to OtisWho Network out of St. Louis for making this deep dive possible. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those questions coming.